Smash the like button if you remember CM Punk being fired on his wedding day during the Vince McMahon regime. The point is, stop acting like R-Truth being released is the most egregious thing that the WWE has ever done. You will move on to the next shocking release eventually down the line.
So, what are my thoughts about R-Truth being released by the World Wrestling Federation? Now, I like R-Truth, but I kind of feel like this was the right move. Now, was this a mutual breakup? Because they gave this man a world title shot at John Cena, which makes sense. I'm not shocked by this release based off that match alone. Why would you give low-tier mid-card guy R-Truth a world title shot against John Cena? Nobody saw that coming. So I felt like maybe that was his farewell match. That might have been a retirement match for R-Truth. That might have been a send-off for R-Truth. Look here, man. You can't go out better than R-Truth. They gave him a world title shot at John Cena. So they did right by R-Truth by doing that. R-Truth can say his last match in the World Wrestling Federation was against a world champion, the legendary John Cena. So why are people complaining? But at the same time, I do love people's outrage, because people's outrage qualify as hypocrisy. You hate the TKO group. Hold on, bruh. The Vince McMahon regime was doing worse when it comes to releases. What about Bray Wyatt? What about Braun Strowman? What about the Good Brothers? The Vince McMahon regime, they were doing worse things. Let's talk about Malachi Black. They gave this man multiple vignettes, and then when he came back to TV, they released him the following week. So calm down. Stop hating on the TKO group, because the Vince McMahon regime, they were doing worser things compared to the TKO group. What about Zelina Vega? She got released. What about Drake Maverick? You act like the TKO group is doing worser releases. The Vince McMahon regime, they were doing heartless releases. What about Drake Maverick? This man was crying on video on Twitter to the point where they had to bring this guy back. So please, man, calm down. Every time somebody gets released, you act like it's the worst thing in the world. I don't get it. R-Truth will be just fine. R-Truth is an older fake pro wrestler. Now, I'm more so intrigued by his prospects after the World Wrestling Federation. Will R-Truth go back to being serious? That's the biggest question. Will R-Truth retire, or will R-Truth keep on wrestling? And will he go back to being a serious fake pro wrestler? Because I always thought that Vince McMahon turned this man into a goofy. But no, it was all R-Truth, because the moment Vince McMahon left, R-Truth was still acting goofy. So you can't blame Vince McMahon for R-Truth shucking and jiving. You cannot blame Vince McMahon for that. That was all R-Truth. R-Truth was still acting goofy after Vince McMahon stepped down. But you cannot say that Paul Levesque didn't do right by R-Truth. He gave this man a world title shot against John Cena, which in hindsight, that was a send-off. Also, he gave this man the tag team titles with The Miz, and I believe they won those belts at WrestleMania. So please, man, like, calm down. R-Truth is an older fake pro wrestler. You gotta suck it up, man. Eras don't last forever. This man been here for over 17 years total. Every era has to come to an end, especially when R-Truth was a low-tier mid-card guy. They gave a low-tier comedy mid-card guy a shot at the world title out of nowhere. So yes, most likely, this might have been a mutual release based off that fact alone. Why would you give a low-tier comedy act mid-card guy a world title shot at a major show? People want to say, oh, but R-Truth was a draw. R-Truth was popular. Well, where's your facts and evidence? that R-Truth was a draw. Like, huh? R-Truth was a low-tier mid-card guy. There's no facts. There's no evidence that R-Truth was a draw. That's not how that works. You sell a couple of t-shirts, that don't mean you're a draw. That's not how that works. Pal, you can make a serious argument that Carlito was the Puerto Rican R-Truth by that same logic. I'm sorry, but guys like that can be expendable. You can replace R-Truth. I'm sorry, you can. But will R-Truth retire? I would like to see a serious R-Truth. I would like to see a serious Ron the Truth Killings. Now, for the record, Paul Levesque had nothing to do with R-Truth getting released. Like I said, Triple H, his job is to book shows. He doesn't release talent. That's not his job. That's not his job description. His job description is booking shows. He's not in charge of budget cuts. R-Truth was most likely a budget cut. Now, do I believe that R-Truth will be a Hall of Famer in the World Wrestling Federation? Yes, most likely. Because every year they have to put a black person in the Hall of Fame. So yes, most likely R-Truth will be a World Wrestling Federation Hall of Famer. Look here, man. Shit happens. Sonya Deville got released. Who else? Chelsea Green got released a couple of years ago. So yes, shit does happen. Okay, how is this evil to release R-Truth? Like I said, I've seen the Vince McMahon regime do worser shit. They fired CM Junk on his wedding day. So please calm down, stop your recency bias. What about Karrion Kross? They released him and his wife. Trust me, World Wrestling Federation programming will be just fine without R-Truth. Stop your recency bias. Like I said, I'm a fan of Ron the Truth Killings. I would like to see a serious Ron the Truth Killings on the indies. Now, where will Ron the Truth Killings go? Most likely TNA, but I wouldn't mind Ron the Truth Killings going to All Elite Fake Pro Wrestling for at least a 2-year stint. Also, was I shocked by this release? No, I was not shocked by this release based on his match with John Cena, because that was a send-off match, obviously. Also, what more does Ron the Truth Killings have to prove in the World Wrestling Federation? He cannot be there forever. Nobody's job is safe. I can't believe there's people that were saying they thought Ron the Truth Killings had a job for life. Doing what? You cannot wrestle forever. This man had two options: either retire or become a backstage agent or be a coach. Like, bro, nobody's job is forever. Everybody gets older when it comes to fake pro wrestling, especially in the World Wrestling Federation. Okay, yes, Ron the Truth Killings made you laugh, but that's about it, man. You need more than that to make an impact in the World Wrestling Federation. Yes, he was a solid comedy guy, but this is fake pro wrestling. You gotta wrestle, you gotta draw money. You have to entertain people once that bell rings. It's not all about the comedy, but y'all gotta keep that same energy in terms of a lot of people had a serious issue with R-Truth wrestling John Cena for the world title. People thought that was an odd choice. And now, days later, you're crying over Ron getting released? Like, huh? That's not being consistent. Stay consistent. Listen, he has done his job. He's done everything that a mid-card guy can do in the World Wrestling Federation. If you're not pushing R-Truth as a main eventer, then most likely he's done everything possible in that company, right? By that same logic, he's a former U.S. champion, 24/7 champion, tag team champion. He's been in big-time matches. He has had pushes. He has had multiple world title shots. In fact, I believe that was his second world title shot at John Cena. This man has had a good, solid career, but R-Truth had a ceiling. He reached his full potential in this company. Who's to blame for that? I'ma say him. Because Vince McMahon never told this man to act goofy. You could make an argument that his goofiness stopped him from being a main eventer. Whose fault is that? Because you cannot blame Vince McMahon for R-Truth being goofy. Because Vince McMahon has been gone for the past 2-3 years. R-Truth has been goofy ever since Vince McMahon has stepped down. So it's all on R-Truth. His gimmick, that's his choice. He likes being goofy. Listen, R-Truth, he looks like he's in a good place. He's not complaining, he's not crying, he's not trashing the World Wrestling Federation. How can he? He did just fine in this company. He reached his full potential. He reached his full ceiling. There's nothing more for Ron in this company. Let's move on. Yes, he made you laugh, but that's about it, man. He was not a main eventer. Stop acting like Ron was a main eventer. He was a low-tier mid-card guy who was known for funny backstage segments. That's about it, man. People need to realize they released Samoa Joe multiple times, and then they brought him back, and then they fired him. So please stop acting like Ron the Truth Killings was a bad release, or this might be the worst thing that TKO has ever done. I'm like, bruh, the Vince McMahon regime, they were doing worse shit than that. But all I'm saying is, the more things change, the more they stay the same. You people deserve all this drama. You deserve it. Because you same people were begging for Vince McMahon to step down. And guess what? He did. He's gone. So Vince McMahon can no longer be your punching bag, your scapegoat. The boogeyman is now gone. But it doesn't matter. You're still complaining. Now you hate Triple H. You hate Paul Levesque, the same man you were jerking off for the past 8 years when he was in a black and gold NXT. You was begging for Paul Levesque to take over this company. Let's be real. Let's speak facts. The World Wrestling Federation, it will always be a family-run business. Here's what I mean. When Vince McMahon first stepped down, the shareholders, they wanted Stephanie McMahon to run the company based on her last name. They wanted a McMahon to run the company. So this company will always be a family-run business. Triple H is the son-in-law of Vince McMahon, which means he's low-key a McMahon. This company will always be ran by somebody who has a connection to the McMahon family. So you gotta suck it up. Either don't watch, or you gotta suck it up and realize this company will always be ran by a McMahon. Let's be real. Paul Levesque is a McMahon. He's a Vince McMahon disciple. He's a Vince McMahon protege. Vince McMahon trained him to have this job. Shane never wanted this job. Vince McMahon, his choice was to give the company to Paul Levesque because Paul Levesque was his son-in-law. Like I said, you better suck it up and get used to it. This company will always be ran by a McMahon. Either the daughter of Paul Levesque, or a cousin, or a brother, it doesn't matter. You have to have a connection to the McMahon family in order to run this company. So no, Paul Levesque will never be fired because this company will always have ties to the McMahon family. The more things change, the more they stay the same. You were crying and complaining how Vince McMahon ran things, and now you're complaining about your savior, Paul Levesque. That's called hypocrisy.